Well, welcome everyone to Renewable Energy Certificates for Green Building Explained. This course is approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, as well as AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. My name is Brett Little, and I'm the program manager here at the nonprofit, the Green Home Institute. The goal of this session is really to learn about being able to access renewable energy certificates as a pathway to zero energy, zero carbon, and how those play in to green building programs, specifically LEED certification, LEED B, D, and C, as well as LEED for homes and mid-rise. And before we get started, a huge thanks to our top tier sponsor, Build Equinox with the Serve 2 smart ventilation system. Unlike traditional ERVs or HRVs, it features many qualities of smarter, balanced ventilation and feedback monitoring. With a standard ERV or HRV, you get a constant low airflow with no relation to actual indoor air quality. For the first 3 days, as you can see by this chart, when the home is occupied, the air quality is poor. The standard ERV just can't keep up. When the occupants leave the home, it just keeps ventilating, wasting energy, wasting money. So since the CERV actually monitors air quality, it only ventilates when it needs to. It can ventilate up to 300 CFM, unlike traditional ERVs or HRVs, quickly purging pollutants as needed. When no ventilation is called for, it can recirculate and unify the home, providing additional heating, cooling, dehumidification in an energy efficient manner. So the CERV does this by monitoring both volatile organic compounds and CO2. In the air, and instead of the ERV exchange core, the CERV uses a high efficiency heat pump to exchange energy between the incoming and outdoor supply air. The CERV has an easy to access filter panel, can be updated to MERV 13 to help start reducing viral load. It's manufactured right here in the US in Urbana, Illinois on a 100% solar powered facility, and it pairs really well with our friends over at Rheem to boost capacity of a Prestige heat pump, or our friends over at Mitsubishi to aid in the distribution of mini split air, or our friends over at Water Furnace with their Boost system. So check them out over at buildequinox.com. And then a huge thanks to our second tier sponsor, Great Lakes Passive House Supplies. They offer a simple concept, frost protected shallow foundation, insulated concrete forms with an air heated radiant force slab, and then some strategies to reduce radon issues, which can be prevalent anywhere. So you can contact them over at totalicf@gmail.com today. Well, I'm really excited to welcome back our speaker, Heather Schrock with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. Heather focuses on developing relationships with all types of entities, including corporations, small businesses, universities, and other nonprofits to help them understand their impacts in carbon, water, and energy. Heather comes to BEF with a diverse background in sustainability, outreach, marketing, and sales. Previously, she was the Portland Regional Manager of Redirect Guide, a local green directory, and has served on the boards of Green Drinks PDX and Voices for Oregon Innovation and Sustainability. She's been a professional singer, dancer, public speaker, and nutritional therapy practitioner. As a Portland native, Heather enjoys the Pacific Northwest for its many outdoor offerings and abundance of fantastic food. So with that, Heather, welcome back, and I'll turn it over to you. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Brett, and thanks again for having me back. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen okay, Brett?
Yeah, I can see it, yep.
All right, and let me just see if I can get rid of that bottom bar. It likes to hang out there. There we go. That should be gone now. All right. Well, thanks everybody again for having me back. I'm excited to come back and talk to you about another but related topic for your green building needs, renewable energy certificates. So I will dive into the presentation here in a second. I'll give you a little bit of background on my organization, just so you know a little bit more about us and the context for why we are working with renewable energy certificates, and also gonna zoom out a little bit into greenhouse gases, just as a little bit of context as well for why renewable energy certificates are important, why renewable energy is important. So I'll go ahead and start with a little bit about my organization, BEF, Bonneville Environmental Foundation. We are a 22-year-old environmental nonprofit based out of Portland, Oregon. Our work is mostly national in scope, mostly North American, but we are working, starting to work internationally as well, which is very exciting. And our vision is to create a thriving world with access to renewable energy and abundant, clean, fresh water for all. So we've been working at the intersection of water, climate, and energy for 22 years. And we have several really great programs to support this mission. We have a renewable energy STEM education program. We have watersheds and habitat restoration programs. We have tribal renewable energy programs, low-income community solar programs, and more. So if you want to learn more about my organization, I'd love to chat with you further at another time, and all my contact information will be on the last slide. But moving forward, let's talk a little bit about the carbon and climate piece of the presentation today. So starting out here, greenhouse gases, they are a problem for our climate. And as you can see here, this graphic is just a smidge out of date, but it's still pretty accurate for global greenhouse gas emissions. So I like to keep it because it's such a nice, colorful graphic. So it is true that globally, about 25%, the biggest chunk of our greenhouse gases does come from electricity and heat. Now in the US, it has flip-flopped a little bit there in the US. Now transportation, which was #2 for a very long time, electricity and heat was still #1 up until recently, just this last year. Transportation has now surpassed electricity and heat for greenhouse gas output in the US. And that's mainly because we actually have done a pretty decent job of greening our electricity grid, but we're still pretty far away from where we need to be. So it's definitely a win, but we have a long way to go. And of course, transportation, there's a lot of advancements, but it's not coming as quickly as the advancements on our grid of greening up our grid with renewable energy. So we are now at renewable energy, or we're now at transportation being #1 in the US, and electricity and heat has popped down to #2, but globally this spread is still pretty accurate. So I do want to talk really quickly just about some semantics here. Dealing with greenhouse gases, you know, in casual conversation, even I interchange many of these terms, you know, carbon, CO2, greenhouse gases. We often call a greenhouse gas footprint a carbon footprint. Of course, that is kind of a shorthand way of saying it. Not only is a greenhouse gas footprint not just a carbon footprint, it is a CO2, so it's carbon dioxide. And a greenhouse gas footprint does include all of the other greenhouse gases. So it's just important to know when we're speaking casually, it's fine to say CO2 or to say carbon or carbon footprint, but it is important to know that there's more than just carbon. Carbon dioxide, while it is the main greenhouse gas, there are many other greenhouse gases that are warming the planet and causing all of the issues related to climate change. And if you're a real nerdy about chemistry or sustainability reporting, you'll want to know that the shorthand that you'll see on sustainability reports, for example, is CO2e. That little e does mean that it's all greenhouse gases included in those calculations. So just good to know those semantics there. Of course, moving forward, you'll probably still hear me just call it a carbon footprint. So this is why we are worried about CO2 and greenhouse gases. This is why it's important to think about renewable energy as a solution for your building project or your home or your lead project, because these greenhouse gases are causing something called the greenhouse effect, which is warming the atmosphere. And of course, I'm sure you all know this already, but just a reminder that what the detriment to the planet of the greenhouse gas effect is the warming causing multiple effects, especially I would say the biggest victim of the greenhouse gas effect is our oceans, not only warming the oceans and melting polar ice caps and causing sea rise, but even more detrimental is the acidification of the ocean, and that has been incredibly detrimental to the sea life and to the balance of the atmosphere in general. So we all, I think, know this, but I just wanted to touch on it again. Any questions popping up yet? Or anybody have any questions so far? I do encourage you all at any time to pop in with a question. I'm not doing a great job of monitoring chat, but feel free to throw a chat in there and Brett will pop in and interrupt me. And so happy to take questions throughout this presentation today. All right. So again, just another illustration here of the difference between these greenhouse gases. Mainly, while carbon dioxide is the one that is most prevalent, it is not the most powerful. Methane, for example, is a very powerful greenhouse gas that warms the atmosphere even more than carbon dioxide. So about 500 pounds of methane released into the atmosphere is the equivalent climate effect of over 11,000 pounds of carbon dioxide. So really interesting to note that we need to be keeping an eye on all of these greenhouse gases, not just carbon dioxide. So this next section I'm going to skip to is carbon offset scope. So this is a way to, carbon offset scopes is based on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol's corporate greenhouse gas accounting framework. So I know that's a lot of words in there, a lot of stuff I threw at you just then, but the greenhouse gas protocols, the reason I'm doing it during this presentation, even though it doesn't necessarily apply directly to buildings, it is a framework from which to think about your buildings, think about your building projects. So this does apply to corporate accounting, but you can use this as a lens also to think about the greenhouse gas footprint of a building project. So as you can see here, there's 3 scopes. Scope 1 is direct emissions. So with a business or corporation, that would be owned facilities, so owned buildings, owned vehicles, so the fuels used in those owned or operationally owned assets. And then scope 2, which is what we're going to zero in on next, is electricity. And that's kind of its own special scope there, and we'll be focusing on that a little bit more moving forward. And scope 3 is all those other things. So from a building perspective, from a business perspective, that could be things like employee commuting, business travel, the purchased goods that go into your business. So whether you're a manufacturer or not, you have to purchase things. If you're just a services business, that might just be computers, but if you're a manufacturer, you've got a whole supply chain. And then that little arrow kind of going outwards from the business, again, you have shipping and transportation and end use of products and things like that. So from a building perspective, you can see that there could be a lens applied here that's helpful. So the building itself would be scope 1, the energy used in the building itself. Scope 2 is still electricity. And as a builder, all of the materials you might buy, which is exciting to hear that you guys are going to have a presentation about materials and embodied carbon, that plays right into this. So that would be the embodied carbon of those materials that are being used to build your project, and the shipping and all of that. And all of this doesn't necessarily apply to what we're going to talk about today, but if you, again, just zooming back so you see the full context of the greenhouse gas footprint of a building project, this would be a useful framework to use. So we're going to talk next about, we're going to zero in on that scope 2 electricity piece. So let's talk about green power and what green power is and what renewable power is. So according to the EPA, green power is a subset of the US electricity sector. So we're all familiar with what conventional energy sources are, coal, nuclear, oil. These are all conventional ways, or ways that are very commonly used to produce electricity and feed the grid. Now, there's kind of two subsets of renewable electricity. So renewable electricity is electricity as it implies. The word renewable means that it is regenerating. It's a resource that has the capacity to continue to replenish itself over and over without depleting a resource on the planet. Now, not all sources of renewable energy are necessarily environmentally safe or benign. There are sources of renewable energy that can have impacts on the environment, such as some large hydro projects. I'm sure many of you are familiar with how large hydropower dams have historically had issues with tribal nations. They've had issues with fish passage. So many of those hydropower plants have improved quite a bit over the years because of demand from environmentalists and tribal nations to improve that fish passage. But renewable energy doesn't necessarily imply that it is perfectly environmentally sound. Green power, however, usually does imply that it causes the least environmental damage. So it's a lot of the same resources: solar, wind, geothermal, what's called low impact hydroelectric sources that cause less or the least amount of damage. And another way to think about green power is that it is voluntary, or it's surplus. So it's not business as usual. It's actually adding to the grid, adding more renewables to the grid. So from these renewable energy sources comes this certificate called a Renewable Energy Certificate. And this is what we're going to be focusing on today. What is a renewable energy certificate? So the generic definition is that it is a tradable market instrument. A renewable energy certificate represents 1 megawatt hour of electricity from a renewable source, such as solar, wind, or geothermal. So if you go back to this slide, a renewable energy certificate really does usually represent the green power piece of this. So I know it's confusing because it says renewable and then green. Why don't they call it a green energy certificate? I don't know why, but a renewable energy certificate, especially one that is a certified renewable energy certificate, is generally going to represent one of these sources of green power, which means it's going to cause less environmental damage, and it's also surplus or voluntary if it's a certified renewable energy certificate. There are certainly some RECs that come from just plain renewable energy, but those aren't really as active on the market, especially for green building. And I'll talk about certification a little bit later as well. So I will definitely do an explanation, a deeper explanation of what a renewable energy certificate is and how it works. But I'm going to share with you now a video that really does a great job of explaining what renewable energy certificates are. And then I will go ahead and take any questions and do a further explanation of them. So hopefully this video loads up and goes. It takes a second to get going. There we go.
Have you ever wondered, when you turn on your lights, where that electricity is coming from? In the United States, most electricity comes from coal, natural gas, and nuclear. And some renewable sources like hydropower, wind, and solar. No matter where electricity is generated, it is mixed together on the shared electricity grid. When you turn on your lights or your TV, you pull some of that electricity out. Once electricity is put on the grid, there's no way to know where it came from or how it was generated. All electricity is the same. If you want to green your power, though, you can do that with renewable energy certificates. These certificates are created each time 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy is generated and put on the grid. A about what an average home uses in a month. The wind turbine spins, or the solar panel collects sunlight, and when enough electricity is generated, a certificate is created. The certificate proves that 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy was generated, and it embodies all the green environmental benefits of that megawatt hour, including lower amounts of smog-causing pollution and greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. All of these benefits are included in the certificate. Whoever owns the certificate owns that megawatt hour of renewable energy. Certificates are used by states and the federal government to track use of renewable energy. They're also used by utility green power programs to track which customers receive green power, because certificates provide the only means to know that 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy was generated on their behalf. When an individual or business buys a certificate, they're buying renewable energy and can claim all the environmental benefits of that megawatt hour. Certificates also allow wind and solar developers to build wherever the resources are, knowing they will be supported by customers from across the country. Renewable energy certificates work because cleaner air and water are worth something extra to all of us, and certificates allow us to buy these environmental benefits no matter where we live. They help bring us that much closer to true energy independence. Power from the sun, wind, and water.
All right, so this is another way to look at the picture of RECs. This little infograph is very helpful. Before I talk about this, were there any questions from the video before I do a little deeper dive on this? All right, seems like we're good. Okay, so I love that video. It really captures the essence of what a renewable energy certificate is. This graphic is also very helpful in my mind to help me keep it all straight. Basically, and it's funny because you might notice there's some brown squiggly lines on the right side coming out. I added those myself because and I'll explain that in a second. This graphic basically is showing that you can have electrons created from a regular fossil fuel generator and electrons generated from a renewable energy generator. And they both dump into the grid, as the video said. It's like drops of water in an ocean. So once those electrons are in the grid, there's no way to tag them and know if this is a green electron or a brown electron. It just goes into the grid and comes out somewhere else when someone turns the power on in their building or in their home. So really what renewable energy certificates were created for originally was really for tracking, just so we knew how much renewable energy was being generated. And then on the other side, who could claim that renewable energy. So the reason I put those squiggly lines over the gray and the green is because really the electrons coming out are a mystery. You don't know what the actual electrons are, but through a renewable energy certificate, you can claim that you are using renewable energy. So that's why that green arrow is going from left to right. It's skipping over the grid and landing on the owner of the person who purchases those RECs. So it separates the electrons from the environmental claim and allows us to track how much renewable energy is actually being generated and then how much is being used on the other side, whether it's through a utility or a private purchase. So again, to talk about the four main elements of why RECs, why did we create RECs, what is the purpose? So as I said, tracking is the most important thing. Because again, we just don't know once those electrons are created and circulating in the grid, there's no way to know where they land. So we have to create the certificate. Now, legally, what this does, this is a legal instrument for renewable energy claims. So it's important to know that this isn't just a system that was made up. It actually is the legal basis. When you own a REC, when you have a REC retired on your behalf, you legally have the right to claim that you are using renewable energy. So I'll ask a trick question in a moment, but there's a lot of ways to obtain a REC. So there's, I think oftentimes people don't realize that a REC is the only instrument by which you can claim to be using renewable energy. So while there's lots of ways to sign up for green or renewable energy, you can certainly buy RECs third party from a REC supplier. You can sign up through your utility's green power program. There's utility programs called green tariffs, which is similar to signing up for your green power program as an individual, but it's really designed for larger businesses, where the utility acts as the middle person to help a larger business obtain a supply of renewable energy from a larger project. So it's not just a mix of random RECs, but they actually comes from a specific project that they're contracting with, that utility is contracting with. So say it's a solar project that the utility is contracting with. There's something called CCAs, Community Choice Aggregation, which are very popular on the West Coast. There's PPAs, Power Purchase Agreements, and VPPAs, also virtual power purchase agreements. There's obviously on-site, so putting solar panels on your own roof. These are all ways to procure renewable energy. However, you still cannot make the claim unless the REC, the underlying REC from any of those procurement methods, must be retired on your behalf. So even if you sign up for, here's the, sorry, I'm gonna go back here a second. So you have to have the REC to claim renewable energy usage. So that is why it's the legal instrument. And then claims, so once you own that and it's legally yours, then you can say you are using renewable energy. And then, of course, the last reason why RECs, the sale and the market of renewable energy certificates helps further develop more renewable energy. So the renewable energy market has really grown because of the REC market. Yes, Brett, I see you popped in. Do you have a question for me? I can't hear you. Are you muted?
Yeah, the question is, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, the question is from the audience. I, as a homeowner, buy the certificate. I also have to go and buy the electricity. Do I then have to sell the certificate to recover those costs?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so you're buying, so when you buy electricity from your utility, what you're buying is the electrons. You're buying the actual power that turns your lights on. When you buy a renewable energy certificate, you're buying the claim that you're using renewable energy. So somewhere upstream, a renewable energy generator created renewable energy, and that certificate was created, and now it's tracked to you, and you can claim to be using renewable energy. So you wouldn't, if you want to claim that you're using renewable energy, then you wouldn't sell those certificates, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to claim you're using renewable energy.
And you really, I mean, the certificates are good for a certain time, right? So it's not like you can buy them and then sell them later. They don't trade like stocks or anything, right?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a little bit of trading in the market, but not by like a smaller user, like a homeowner. You're not going to really get anything out of reselling them. They don't necessarily, I wouldn't say that would be like an investment. There's certainly a little bit of that going on the larger market, but we're talking about volumes of hundreds of thousands of RECs, not like, the dozen or so RECs that would, be for a homeowner. So in terms of, I guess it depends on the reason you're buying the RECs. So usually you're not buying RECs and selling them. You're not recovering costs. There's no cost to recover. You're buying a product that allows you to claim to use renewable energy, and that's it. It's retired on your behalf. You now can say you're using renewable energy. So that is the cost of being able to say you're using renewable energy, is the cost of the REC. Yeah, so I guess maybe I'm not fully understanding the question, but there wouldn't be a need to recover costs, because you're buying the REC for the purpose of claiming to be using to use renewable energy in your home or project?
Yeah, you know, and some more comments are coming in, and I'm seeing sort of a pattern, and it's really, you know, asking what is the value I get out of this? You know, we people put solar panels on their roof, it reduces their bill, right? But in this case, you know, what savings or financial benefit is there to me to do this? And so I'll kind of take a quick stab,
Oh,
and Heather,
yeah.
maybe you can add to it. But it's like, you know, in many cases there are benefits to having green certification, and this is one of, and we're going to talk more about it later, but this is one of the ways to get to that. And there can be increased home owner value on a green certified home, or a tax credit, or you name it. So this is one pathway to get to green certification, which we're going to bring up a little bit later. But for those of you who are wondering about value, you know, that would be my statement on that. But Heather, maybe you can weigh in there too. So.
Right. So especially for a homeowner. So the value there, it's not a value proposition buying RECs. So you're buying RECs because you want to be using renewable energy and you want to support the renewable energy market. And yes, there are those benefits of, you know, maybe you'll reach some kind of certification through that, but it's not a savings. That's not the reason for buying RECs. The savings, if you wanted to look at it from a value proposition standpoint, the reason RECs are available third party and you know, through a market is because the upfront cost of putting solar on a building is quite high. And yes, over time you do save money on your bills, but not a lot of people can do that. But a lot of people still want to be able to claim to be using renewable energy. So there is that savings down the road if you make the large upfront investment of putting, you know, solar on your roof. And RECs are a way to make that claim without that upfront investment. So, but you're not buying RECs for any financial gain necessarily. You're buying them for the purpose of using renewable energy. And it could help with certification. You're doing it to support renewable energy markets, but it's not really for financial gain.
I'm going to try to answer this question without reading it with another question about utility and benefiting the utility company who has, in some cases, these requirements on them. But, you know, going back to what you said, you put solar panels on your roof and you're not necessarily using solar energy, because perhaps maybe in the fine print somewhere, whether it's your solar installer or the financial mechanism by which you funded the solar, or perhaps even your utility company said, hey, I own those RECs, not you. Is that something we have to look out for when we're putting solar on, or financing solar, or signing these agreements with our utility companies for solar?
Yeah, and that's actually my very next slide, is the trick question. So if you install solar on your rooftop, but you sell the RECs, can you claim to be using renewable energy? And you kind of answered it there. The answer is no. So this is where this really definitely is a hang up for people, because they're like, but it's right on my roof and the electrons are going right into my house. But it has to be connected to those RECs. So there are, especially for homeowners, there's programs. You may have heard of rooftop leasing, things like that, where companies will come in, put solar panels on your roof, but in the fine print, in the contract, they are technically just leasing your roof. They are retaining the RECs, selling the RECs, and they are getting all the tax benefits. So that's the business model for some of these companies, is they get the tax credits and the revenue from the RECs, and that supports their model. But you cannot claim that you're actually using renewable energy, which of course, as a homeowner, it's not as big a deal. It's more important for businesses who are making big sustainability claims. If this happened to a business and they were claiming to be 100% renewable, but they sold their RECs, that would be a big issue for them. For a homeowner, unless you are using that claim to reach a certification, if you're trying to get certified under some net zero or some kind of LEED program, you could not sell your RECs and still claim to be using renewable energy.
And you didn't just say there are tax credits for the RECs, right? Or you just don't get the tax credits if you don't own the RECs?
The tax credits are, it depends on what state you're in, and there's different tax credits in different places, but and these companies kind of are aware of that. But yes, they claim the tax credit if you work with one of those companies. Otherwise, if you do it yourself, then you claim the tax credit. So it depends on who you're working with to install.
And we're talking about the federal tax credit, correct? The 26% one.
Yeah, and that's part of the negotiation when you're working with a company that has that business model versus just a regular solar installer.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So this is the point where people's mind starts to boggle a little bit, and I get it. You're like, I don't understand. It just seems like a crazy system. You know, it's just like people say, oh, it's just a piece of paper, you know, these certificates. And people have a hard time sometimes grasping this concept of renewable energy certificates. So one thing that might be helpful is to think of another system that we all depend on and rely on that really is just a certificate system for tracking value. And that system is money. Money is not that different from a REC. Money is an invisible attribute. It's tracked mostly digitally. We do have these paper certificates that represent a value, but what does it actually mean, right? And yet we use this system every single day. We all rely on money. So just when people kind of start feeling like RECs might be this like fantasy world, it's not. It's based on very real accounting, tracking, registering, and the certificates are based on a real system that is out there that is tracking all of these benefits and attributes. So it's not that different from the fact that the value of money really is also an invisible attribute. So speaking of certification, voluntary RECs, which would be the RECs that anyone probably on this call would be dealing with, unless you are here representing a state or a county or a government of some kind. If you're a builder or a homeowner, you're going to be purchasing RECs from what's called the voluntary market. So there is a compliance market, and as I said, that would be the market that uses RECs for states or governments. And that would be, for example, if you live in Washington State over here on the West Coast. Washington State has something called a renewable portfolio standard, and that is a goal that they set through their own policy, through their own governmental agencies, that they as a state want to be using X amount of renewable energy by some year. So I don't remember what it exactly is, but maybe it's 30% or 50% by 2030. And that is a statewide goal. So that makes Washington a compliance market. So when they are scooping up and purchasing RECs for the state, they don't have to meet the same kind of standards as GREENE certified RECs, which are on the voluntary market. They are scooping up RECs to meet their compliance market standards, which is a very different market than the voluntary market. So what I'm talking about today is just the voluntary market. So in the voluntary market, we have something called GREENE certification. GREENE are the folks who put together that nice video that we watched. And GREENE is an offshoot of an organization, a nonprofit called Center for Resource Solutions. So as the market developed for renewable energy certificates, the voluntary market, when it started going beyond just being a tracking system for utilities to keep track of how much renewable energy is being generated, and businesses and homes and individuals wanted to start claiming to use renewable energy, this certification system arose as a way to just lay some groundwork and some rules to make sure that the renewable energy market was effectively improving and growing more renewable energy assets on the grid. So what GREENE certification does is it creates the minimum standards. So for example, the minimum standard for a GREENE certified renewable energy certificate is that it must have been generated within 3 months before the year that we're in or 6 months after. So that's called vintage. That is the year, the vintage, just like a fine wine, it's the year it was made. So if you buy a Greenie Rec, you know that it was created within 3 months prior to this year or 6 months after this year. So that's called a Greenie year. So you know it was created recently. Greenie also provides audits. So they are going in and checking. Bonneville Environmental Foundation, we do supply voluntary recs to the market. So we get audited by Greenie. They check all of our paperwork, our sales contracts, and they make sure that that everything is accounted for. They also provide a third party. So they are the third party verifier that comes in and makes sure all these things are in line, that we are meeting the minimum standards. And then ultimately what that does is it prevents any double counting, because that could definitely be an issue if there's nobody double checking the chain of custody of renewable energy certificates. So that's why it's important to make sure you are purchasing Greenie certified renewable energy certificates, because then they meet all of these standards. And then once you do that, you get these renewable energy certificates retired on your behalf. And for example, here, I'll show you a certificate for somebody who purchased renewable energy certificates. And this is the first page of the certificate that shows that, you know, it's got that Greenie certification logo there. Very important to have that. It gives you some equivalencies over here, which are interesting to note. But most importantly is the second page, which tells you where it came from, when it was produced, and how much you got. Those are the 3 most important things to know. You want to know where it came from, and this one came from an Idaho solar project. You want to know the vintage, which is the production date. This one was in 2017. This is an old certificate. And then you want to know how many megawatt hours. So 52 megawatt hours or 52,000 kilowatt hours. And this is an example of the type of certificate you might get if you purchase RECs from a third-party supplier. I'll pause there. Any questions coming up, Brett?
Nope.
Okay. So a question I often get, now that we have hopefully a fairly decent understanding of renewable energy certificates, is what is the difference between a renewable energy certificate and a carbon offset? Are they the same thing? And the answer is no. These are 2 very different instruments. The renewable energy certificate, as I mentioned before, is an instrument that measures kilowatt hours of renewable energy created on a grid. Now, a carbon offset is measuring something different. While they're related, its unit of measure is very different. It's measuring greenhouse gases, and it's measuring greenhouse gases reduced or removed from the atmosphere. So while a renewable energy certificate is only going to represent green power from a renewable energy project, offset projects vary widely, and there's many different types of carbon offset projects out there. So carbon offset project not only could include renewable energy, which is one source of reducing greenhouse gases, but you have all these other types. These are just some examples. You can capture methane from dairy, you can sequester carbon in grasslands or forestry, composting and landfill gas capture. The marine efficiency one is an interesting one. It improves efficiency of shipping vessels across the ocean, which of course decreases their impacts. You can support projects in developing countries like forestry or cook stoves or clean water projects that help reduce greenhouse gas impacts. So it's a very different instrument. Both are great. Both are good for reducing impacts on the climate, though. They just are utilized differently in the market and for claims and such. So just here's an illustration, for example, of the unit of measure. A carbon offset is 1 metric ton of CO2, and there's that little E. So a carbon offset is 1 metric ton of greenhouse gases removed or reduced from the atmosphere, while whereas a REC is 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity produced and or generated. So the other big difference is what you can say, depending on which instrument you purchase. So if you purchase carbon offsets, you can say you've offset. You've offset scope 1 and 2, you've offset your unavoidable footprint, you've offset travel or shipping, whatever it is you're offsetting, you can use the word offset. Whereas with RECs, you have to be careful not to use the word offset because you're not purchasing an offset. This is probably the biggest and most common mistake I see with people who purchase RECs, is then they claim to have offset their electricity. And that is not true. You have not offset your electricity. You have purchased renewable energy, which of course reduces your electricity footprint, but you have not offset it. It's very clear in the green marketing guides that you're not supposed to use the word offset unless you purchase an offset. That said, it's not like there's offset police running around out there. So, you know, while it's important to know the difference, you know, you're not going to get fined or anything if you say it wrong. However, if you work for a large enough company or a big enough project or a building project that's going to be making claims, for example, if you're building a big apartment building and you want to be able to market that the apartment building is green and is using renewable energy or offsetting its emissions, you want to be sure that you are marketing that correctly, just for the purpose of making sure that you are accurately describing your environmental attributes to the people that are going to be living there. And, you know, if you do say the wrong thing, you know, the real issue would be, you know, potentially bad press or being thrown under the bus by someone who, you know, would maybe write an article or something. And that definitely happens. So we have seen businesses, you know, get bad press when they say things wrong and make claims that are false. So just a reminder, going back to those scopes that we learned at the beginning, you can use carbon offsets for all 3 scopes if you want. You can offset your electricity usage. What you would do if you wanted to offset your electricity usage is you would convert those kilowatt hours to metric tons of greenhouse gases. However, most people simply use renewable energy certificates for their scope 2 emissions, and they just match the kilowatt hours, reducing their scope 2 to 0. Again, not offsetting it, but reducing it to 0. In the next section, I'm just going to talk a little bit about LEED. For those of you who have done any LEED projects and want to understand a little bit more about how to get LEED points using renewable energy certificates. But before I move on to that, again, just wanted to take a moment to see if there's any questions coming in through chat, or anyone have any other thoughts they want to share before I go on to LEED. All right. So as most of you who have done any LEED work before, you know there's a few different versions out there. The ones that are still actively being used, the V2009 or V3, I still see a lot of these come through my desk. Some people still pursuing this version of LEED. And I've given some examples here, but basically if you're using this version and you want to get a point for using renewable energy certificates, you have to match for 2 points. You match 35% of 2 years of the project's electricity use. For two points plus 1, you have to match, or for 3 points, excuse me, you have to match 70% of 2 years. And I gave an example here of a project that used 1 million kilowatt hours annually, how many RECs that would be. So it'd be 700 RECs for 35% or 1,400 for the 70%. Now in V4, they changed that. In V4, they went to 5 years, and you get 1 point for 50% or 2 points for 100%. And then we get to V4.1, which is an interesting one because it does keep changing since it's come out. They've rewritten it a few times. So right now, this is the most recent version that I believe has been approved. I just checked it yesterday. But right now, they've gone to 10 years, 10-year minimum contracts, and you can get up to 5 points for between 10 and 50% of your 10-year electricity use. And this V4.1 Tier 2 is for new offsite renewable energy. So this would, there's an additional requirement that if you purchase RECs for this Tier 2 version, that the RECs are new, and they have a standard for that. I believe it has to be generated within the last 2 years, or potentially even in the future. You contract to purchase RECs from a project that's currently being built, or you can purchase regular RECs from a project that's not new. You still have to have the vintage, has to be generated within the year, but the project itself is not a new project, and you can earn up to 3 points for 35, 70, or 100% usage of those RECs. And for those of you who might be wondering, okay, now that I know about this, where can I get RECs? So as I said, there's a few different ways to get RECs. If you're just going to purchase them off the shelf, so to speak, and you're not going to do like on-site, you're not going to do a PPA or a VPPA, you can purchase RECs through a third-party supplier. And here's an example of a third-party supplier where you simply go online, enter the amounts you need, and purchase them. Again, you see there the Greenie certified is popped out in blue, so make sure that whoever your third-party supplier is Greenie certified. LEED does require Greenie certified RECs, and then you just purchase them and submit that to LEED, and they approve it for your project. So I know Brett has a few things to add here specifically for LEED Zero and for some homeowner versions of LEED. Brett, if you want to pop on now, I do have 2 more slides that are just resources and then my contact information, but you're welcome to hop in now with your last couple of slides if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So we got some time for questions here after that if you all want to stick around, and if not, and you have to get going, that's okay too. You'll be good to go and approved for your CEUs after this last one here. So just real quick, for those of you doing LEED for homes, whether it be single family, multifamily, or mid-rise, it's actually the green power and carbon offsets is not built into the into the rating system. So it's an actual innovation credit that you have to go find. So here's a direct link, and I'll paste it in the chat too. So just know you won't find it on the checklist, but it's pretty much, I think, corresponds to the V4 one.
Yeah, it's the same requirement, the 1 or 2 points for 50% or 100% of 5 years of electricity.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So that's all you need to know, nothing too different there. But LEED Zero is something brand new, and what you should know about LEED Zero is that first of all, there's a lot to it. There's energy, there's water, there's waste. We have a whole webinar on it. You can go check out the whole thing. But basically, if you have a LEED certified project now that you did years and years ago, this is a great way to kind of keep that conversation going and keep showing that you're green. And so whether it's homes or multifamily or even commercial, you can get it LEED Zero because it's an operational program. And so the way that you do that is you look at these 4 sort of features, and you look at them from like sort of a better good best, right? So like it gets worse as you go down the chain. Ideally, we want all production on site. If that can't be possible, then you want a community solar or in some cases wind. And if that can't be done, you want to use like an offsite generation project such as a power purchase agreement. Lastly, if that's not possible, you can pick up the RECs like we've been talking about this entire session. So you have to write up a narrative on why you can't do what you did, or why you're using a diverse scope of, and it might be a cost issue, right? It's expensive to put on solar in some cases, or maybe it's like where I'm at, it's not legal to build community solar, which is unfortunate. So, you look at all those things in the mix, and then sort of RECs is sort of your last stand to achieve LEED Zero. And so I'm gonna also pull open here this little workbook, and I'll share it with you all so you have access to it. But basically you can kind of see here this is an imaginary project that used 300 kilowatt hours evenly each month. That never happens, but let's just pretend. And let's say they had some on-site solar, and that on-site solar, 50 of those kilowatt hours were used on the site itself, consumed. And then let's say another 50, and they owned the renewable energy credits to it, which is key. We talked about that. You have to own them to get the points here, otherwise you don't. Went back to the grid during those months. So you can see here, there's a lot of numbers down here. We have a whole session on this. You can go over it later, but you can see here we're still 2,400 kilowatt hours shy of achieving LEED zero. And so you can do that. You know, what is that's 2,400 divided by 12. That's is that 200 kilowatt hours here? So you can just kind of play around here with the numbers, right? And so it just zeroed out. So someone went out in this imaginary fictitious project, LEED project here, and bought 200 kilowatt hours a month from a certified renewable energy credit to achieve LEED zero. So I'll share that with you if you wanna check that out. But yeah, let's get to some questions now. But real quick, as those questions are pouring in, again, where is my CEU certificate? We hear it all the time. Go to that go to your spam box, customer care at GoToWebinar sent it to you. It probably hit your spam. Pull it out of there, take that survey. If you're watching this in the future on demand, take the quiz with an 80% passing rate. You can take it on our Thinkific channel or USGBC, wherever you're watching it. Take the quiz, pass the test. And a huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our new executive director, and all of our sponsors, especially our top tier ones, Mitsubishi Electric, Build, Equinox, and Rheem, helping you get to net zero, healthier homes, healthier spaces. And so check them out over on our website. So this is kind of a general question, Heather, but you know, how do I find the right program for purchasing RECs? We kind of went over how to find some of the programs, what to do for LEED zero there, but you know, it's kind of a big question. But you know, what are your thoughts on that?
For just purchasing like third-party verified RECs, like free off the marketplace, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of suppliers listed on the EPA website, and on the RE100 website, which is Renewable Energy 100. It's a program for businesses, but there's resources there. There's resources on the Green website for where to purchase them. They all list third-party providers of renewable energy certificates, and that's if you don't have a program through your own utility. Oftentimes there is a green power program hidden in there somewhere. A lot of them don't have programs, but a lot of them do. So check your utility first, especially if you're a homeowner, because that's gonna be the easiest route. You check a box, it gets added to your bill every month. But if you're looking for a larger purchase, you'll probably save money by going through a third-party supplier. So check the Green website, check the EPA website, or the RE100 website. Those are all good resources for REC providers.
Thanks, Heather. And just so you know, I'm putting some of those things I referenced into the chat for you all to check out. Here's a question. So if a business in your example buys all electric from green energy sources, do they get RECs, CO2 offsets, or none of the above?
Sorry, repeat it. So if a business
in your example buys all electric from green energy sources, do they get RECs, CO2 offsets, or none of the above?
If a business is purchasing, it sounds like they're purchasing RECs. They're purchasing green energy. They're purchasing certified RECs.
I think, unfortunately, I just realized this person has taken off, so they've left. Maybe you already answered it, but I think what they're getting at is, you know, if it's not, maybe they're just buying something on the market if it's not certified, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying just something that's floating around that says it's green energy, or, you know, and it's not Greenie certified, I don't know what you're getting. Unless you're buying a Greenie certified renewable energy certificate and you see the Greenie logo, that is your guarantee that you are getting renewable energy, that you can claim you're using renewable energy, and that it's being retired on your behalf. So there's certainly other things floating around out there that are you know, kind of sneaky the way they word it, to say, oh, support green power or whatnot, but you're not actually able to claim you're using renewable energy unless you purchase something that has renewable energy certificate embedded in it with the Greenie certification.
Yeah, good point. So, you know, this question here, and I think I think about this too a lot. You know, the question is, do all the available RECs get sold each year? And I want to kind of add on to that a little bit. Like, when, I mean, I guess for me, it's, you know, I'm going to buy RECs to hit zero carbon with my house here soon. But for me, it's very important that that sends a market signal. And how do I know it's sending that market signal to go out and build more renewables? I know I'm just one person, but like, so the question, you know, from our attendee, you know, are they getting sold each year? And if not, are we not then sending market signals to build more? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So what I will say is the rec market is exploding, and whether or not they're being sold or simply traded and retired. So there's a difference between being sold and traded and retired. They're definitely all getting used up. Prices are, and that's a big reason why pricing is going up, because the demand is higher than supply. We've had numerous Fortune 500 companies making net zero, carbon neutral, 100% RE100 claims in the last year, especially. So while the rec market's been around for a long time and has been sending those signals for a long time, it has never dipped. It continues to grow. So you as an individual homeowner buying 12 RECs a year might not feel like you're making a big impact, but the aggregated impact of thousands of homes and thousands of businesses, and now the largest businesses on the planet all making huge renewable energy commitments, which may or may not be off the shelf RECs, but it's still definitely propelling the renewable energy market forward. And a big sign of that is that that very first graphic I shared with you, where the electricity and transportation has flipped. Now the electricity is not the biggest greenhouse gas output from our country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've noticed, you know, like, I think you know, renewables, I think in the last year have overtaken, you know, fossil fuels as far as added capacity in the US. Mm-hmm. Is there a correlation between these REC purchases and that, or increases in stock value in renewable energy? I mean, do you see any correlations like that? Or is it just like, oh, it's all going up, you know?
Correlations between renewable energy and stock value?
So yeah, you know, correlations between RECs being bought and the production of renewables being added every year, you know, or stock value. Yeah.
I'm not sure I can speak to stock value. I don't really keep track of stocks per se, but I do track the renewable energy market report every year. And maybe I can send you this graph afterwards, and it's an interesting graph that shows that, you know, rec purchases just keep getting more and more every year, even as new renewable energy products enter the market, like PPAs, VPPAs, CCAs. The rec market still never diminishes. Like, just the third-party rec market continues to grow as an entry point for any person or business to start their renewable energy purchases. And then if you want to make a bigger commitment, do something like a PPA or on-site. You know, the gentleman's question or the lady's question, I'm not sure who asked the question earlier about return on investment for RECs. You know, as I said, there's no return on investment for RECs other than you are buying RECs because you want RECs and you want to support renewable energy. Like, when you look at it from a purely financial point of view, that's not the point. Right. However, yes, as a larger company or as a home putting solar on, eventually after a large upfront investment, there would be some financial return on investment. But the third party, you know, off the shelf rec market is not a place for financial returns. But it does continue to keep growing. Yes.
Do you see, or are you involved in the rec market making a transition to community solar? In that, I look at, you know, my local utility here, I just picked up, you know, 3 blocks of community solar. Certainly not enough to offset my house. And it'd be very, very expensive to buy them all to offset my house. But it's kind of cool because it's like, you know, they told me, first of all, we're like 95% sold out and we're going to sell out soon. And maybe they just said that so I would buy them, but you know, and I get the recs for it. And it's kind of like I can go drive and maybe see the panel that I bought, right? Like, I don't know which panel is mine, but you know, I could go see it somewhere. Do you see it transitioning more to the community solar model? Are you involved in that? What are your thoughts?
So it's less about transitioning and more about simply addition. There's going to be more addition of community solar. In fact, that is something my organization works very heavily in community and tribal renewables, low-income community projects. That's one of our offshoots of what we do. And so there's more and more community solar coming online. However, it is important to note that really where the rubber hits the road, where it makes financial sense, is the largest scale utility solar and wind projects. That's where it's going to make the most sense. Whereas community solar is great unless it's at a really, really large scale, which most community solar isn't. It's great and it is getting more renewables on the grid, but it's never going to outplay utility scale solar projects or utility scale wind projects, like huge projects. That's where it makes the most financial sense.
Yeah. Well, Heather, I do not see any other specific questions here in regards for this session, but where if people do have some questions for you or want to follow up or learn more or, maybe go zero carbon, where can they contact you at?
Well, my last slide does have my contact information on it if you wanted to put it up there.
It is up right now, just as a hint to you. You can see it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I was like, can they see that? Because that's what's there. That's me. Yeah, you can email me at bef.org, and I'm happy to answer any further questions that folks have and help you on your journey with if it is RECs, or if you have questions about offsets or water. I did a previous thing on water. Also happy. I don't know how many of you were at that one as well, but if you have questions about water, I can help you with that too. So feel free to contact me.
Yeah, thanks for reminding everyone. We do have a previously recorded one on water offsets, which is very important. We're running out of water. We're having lots of water issues. I'm in a severe drought out here, so we got to do what we can with water too. So Heather, thank you so much. Thanks to Bonneville Environmental Partnership for having you out again, and have a great summer and take care, and we'll be in touch. So
thanks so much. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.